Dr. Schacht, by the way, the photograph number 10, which was shown you yesterday, you might hand this to Dr. Schacht. I intend to ask him. That was one of the occasions on which you wore the party badge, which you referred to, was it not?
Das kann sein.
Well, you're quite sure of it, are you not?
Ich kann es nicht genau unterscheiden, aber es kann sein, und dann beweist es, dass das Bild nach 1937 Januar aufgenommen sein muss.
Yes. That's what I wanted to prove. And as a matter of fact, it was taken after 1941, wasn't it?
Verzeihung?
As a matter of fact, Bormann didn't come to any important official position until after 1941, did he?
Bormann?
Yes. Yes.
Das weiß ich nicht.
You might get the... Now, if we may return to the four-year plan, which began in 1936. As I understand it, you opposed the appointment of Goering to have charge of the four-year plan on two grounds. First, you thought that new plan might interfere with your functions. And secondly, if there were to be a four-year plan, you did not think Goering was fit to administer it.
Ich weiß nicht, was Sie unter Opponieren verstehen. Ich war nicht zufrieden damit und hielt die Wahl Görings nicht für geeignet, um irgendwelche Wirtschaftspolitik leitend in die Hand zu nehmen.
As a matter of fact, you've described Goering as a fool in economics, have you not?
Ja, wie man in einer lebhaften Unterhaltung so etwas sagt.
Yeah. Or in interrogation.
Auch Interrogations sind manchmal lebhaft.
Now, very soon, Goering did begin to interfere with your functions, did he not?
Hat das wiederholt versucht, glaube ich.
Well, he got away with it too, didn't he?
Ich verstehe nicht, was Sie darunter meinen, he got away.
Well, this American slang is difficult, I admit. It means he succeeded.
Hat im Juli 1937 mich völlig an die Wand gedrückt.
Yeah. That started over a proposal that he made, or a measure that he took with reference to mining.
Jawohl.
He also made a speech to some industrialists, didn't he?
Ich nehme an, dass verschiedene Reden an Industrielle gehalten hat. Ich weiß nicht, auf welche Rede Sie anspielen. Ich vermute auf die Rede im Dezember 36 oder so.
Well, I am referring to the speech in which you said to us in interrogation that Goering had assembled industrialists and said a lot of foolish things about the economy which you had to refute.
Ja, das ist die Sitzung vom 17. Dezember 1936.
And then you wrote to Goering complaining about his mining measures.
Ich nehme an, dass Sie den Brief vom 5. August meinen.
Right? That is document EC 497. USA 775. And in that letter of August 1937, you said this, if I quote you correctly. In the meantime, I have repeatedly stressed the need of increased exports and have worked to bring it about. The very necessity of bringing our armament up to a certain level as rapidly as possible must place in the foreground the idea of as large returns as possible in foreign exchange, and therewith the greatest possible assurance of raw material supplies. Correct?
Das nehme ich an.
Yeah. And you also said this, I believe. This view of the economic situation, which I have explained above, I have held from the first moment of my collaboration. That was also true, was it not?
Sicherlich.
Now, both of those things were true, were they not?
Jawohl.
And then you concluded, addressing Goering, I ask you to believe me, my dear Prime Minister, that it is not my intention at all to wish to impede your policies in any way whatsoever. I offer no opinion, either whether my views, which deviate from your economic policy, are correct or not. I have full sympathy with your activities. I do believe, however, that in a totalitarian state, it is wholly impossible to conduct an economic policy divided against itself. And that was also true, was it not?
Ja.
And that was the basis on which you and Goering disagreed so far as policy was concerned.
Soweit was betreffend ist, ich verstehe nicht. Policy oder was? Was meinen Sie dabei? Ich meine die Art und Weise der Geschäftsführung.
Yes.
Jawohl. Ganz abgesehen von anderen Differenzen, die wir miteinander hatten.
Well, now the other differences were personal differences. You and Goering didn't get along well together.
Im Gegenteil. Bis dahin waren wir immer sehr nett miteinander.
Oh, were you?
Oh ja.
So, the beginning of your differences with Goering was over the struggle as to which of you would dominate the preparations for war.
Nein,
Well,
da muss ich absolut widersprechen. Die Differenzen,
let's... do you want to say anything more about it?
die Differenzen, die zu dem Rücktritt von mir führten, waren darüber, dass Goering das Kommando über die Wirtschaftspolitik führen wollte und ich die Verantwortung übernehmen sollte. Und ich war der Meinung, dass wer die Verantwortung übernimmt, auch das Kommando haben muss. Und wenn einer das Kommando hat, dann muss er auch die Verantwortung übernehmen. Das ist der formelle Grund, warum ich um meine Entlassung nachgesucht habe.
Well, now, I turn to your interrogation of the 16th of October, 1945, United States Exhibit 636, and ask if you did not give the following testimony. By Schacht. After Goering had taken over the 4 years plan And I must say, after he had taken over the control of foreign exchange already since April 1936, but still more after the 4-year plan, September 36, he has always tried to get control of the whole economic policy. One of the objects, of course, was that as plenipotentiary for war economy, in case of war, and he being only too anxious to get everything into his hands, he tried to get that away from me. Certainly, as long as I had the position of Minister of Economics, I have certainly objected to that. You made that statement?
Ich glaube, das ist richtig.
Yes. And then you described your last visit with him after Luther, for 2 months, had endeavored to unite Goering and yourself.
That means Hitler, not Luther. Hitler, that's a mistake.
Yeah. And you described it as follows. Then I had a last talk with Goering. And at the end of this talk, Goering said, "But I must have the right to give orders to you." Then I said, "Not to me, but to my successor." I have never taken orders from Goering. And I would never have done it, because he was a fool in economics. And I knew something about it, at least. Question. Well, I gather that was a culminating, progressive, personal business between you and Goering. That seems perfectly obvious. Answer, certainly. Is that correct?
Sicher.
And then the interrogator went on, "Let's go into the duties of that job for a moment and see what he was trying to take away from you. There are only 2 possibilities, as it has been explained to me. If I am wrong, correct me. One would be the preparation for a mobilization, and the other would be the actual taking charge of this in the event of war. Otherwise, the post had no meaning. So the things you resisted his taking away from you, as I see it, was the right to be in charge of the preparation for mobilization, and secondly, the right to control in the event of war. Answer, correct. Did you give that testimony?
Mr. Justice, Sie werfen hier zeitlich verschiedene Dinge durcheinander. Die Differenzen mit Goering über den sogenannten Generalbevollmächtigten für die Kriegswirtschaft fallen in den Winter 36, 37. Und die Unterhaltung, die sogenannte letzte Unterhaltung mit Goering, die Sie eben erwähnt haben, hat im November 37 stattgefunden. Ich erklärte mich, ich glaube im Januar 37, sofort bereit, das Amt und die Tätigkeit als Generalbevollmächtigter für die Kriegswirtschaft an Goering abzutreten. Das geht ja aus der Notiz vom Tagebuch Jodl hervor, die hier schon wiederholt erwähnt worden ist. Damals hat das Kriegsministerium und insbesondere Blomberg gebeten, mich in der Stellung als Generalbevollmächtigter für die Kriegswirtschaft zu erhalten, weil ich doch nun einmal Wirtschaftsminister sei. Und solange ich Wirtschaftsminister sei, Darüber liegt ein Briefwechsel vor, der hier auch von Ihnen, glaube ich, dem Gericht eingereicht worden ist.
Well, Dr. Schacht, I think the dates appear in your testimony. I'm not concerned at the moment with the sequence of events. I'm concerned with the functions that you were quarreling over and which you described in your interrogation. And the questions and answers which I read to you are correct. Those are the answers you made at the time, aren't they?
Ja, ich kann aber nur Folgendes sagen. Wenn Sie mich nach diesen einzelnen Abschnitten hier fragen, dann gibt es ja hier ein ganz anderes Bild, wenn Sie nicht die Zeitfolge auseinanderhalten, Mr. Justice. Sie können doch nicht Dinge vom Januar und vom November hier in dieselbe Linie rücken und dann mich fragen, ob das korrekt ist. Das ist nicht korrekt.
Well, let's get what is wrong about this, if anything. When was your last conversation with Goering in which you told him he'd give orders to your successor but not to you?
Im November 37.
Yes. Now, the question as to the duties of the job has nothing to do with relation to time, has it? The plenipotentiary for war, the disagreement between you and Goering. And in order to make it perfectly clear, I'll read this question and answer to you again. But I'm not concerned with time, I'm concerned with your description of the job. Question. Let's go into the duties of that job for a moment and see what he was trying to take away from you. There are only two possibilities, as it has been explained to me. If I am wrong, correct me. One would be the preparation for a mobilization, and the other would be the actual taking charge of this in the event of war. Otherwise, the post had no meaning. So the things you resisted his taking away from you, as I see it, was the right to be in charge of the preparation for mobilization, and secondly, the right to control in the event of war. And you answered correct. Did you not?
Diese Differenz hat mit der...
Well, can you answer me first as to whether you did give that answer to that question, that it was correct?
Das Protokoll ist korrekt.
Yes.
Und jetzt wünsche ich
Yes.
zu sagen...
Now,
Nein, bitte lassen Sie mich aussprechen hier.
go ahead with your explanations.
Ja. Jetzt wünsche ich zu sagen, dass diese Differenz zwischen Goering und mir mit der Unterhaltung vom November gar nichts zu tun hat und dass es auch gar keine Differenz zwischen Goering und mir war. Diese Differenz, von der Sie eben das Protokoll verlesen haben, fällt in den Januar 1937. Und es war gar keine Differenz zwischen Goering und mir, denn ich habe ja sofort gesagt, nehmen Sie mir das Amt des Generalbevollmächtigten für die Kriegswirtschaft ab, übertragen Sie es Goering. Und das Kriegsministerium, Herr von Blomberg, hat protestiert, nicht ich. Ich habe dieses Amt mit Wonne an Herrn Goering abgeben wollen.
Is there anything in writing about that, Dr. Schacht?
Ihre eigenen Dokumente, die Sie hier eingereicht haben, ich bitte meinen Anwalt, die Dokumente hervorzusuchen und in der Re-Examination sie hier vorzubringen. Sie sind von der Anklagebehörde hier eingereicht.
Good. Now, isn't it the fact that your controversy with Goering was a controversy of a personal character between you and him for control, and not a controversy as to the question of armament? You both wanted to rearm as rapidly as possible.
Dieses Spiel mit Worten, ob es personal oder sonst etwas gewesen ist, möchte ich nicht mitmachen, Mr. Justice. Ich habe Differenzen mit Goering über die Sache gehabt. Und wenn Sie sagen, ob es Armament, Speed und Ausmaß war, so habe ich hierüber mit Goering die größten Differenzen in der Meinung gehabt. Ich habe niemals bestritten, dass ich aufrüsten wollte für eine gleichberechtigte Stellung Deutschlands. Ich wollte niemals weiter aufrüsten. Goering wollte weiter aufrüsten. Und hier liegt eine Differenz, die hier nicht aus der Welt geschafft werden kann.
Well, now, I don't want to play upon words. And if you say my reference to it as personal is a play upon words, you force me to go into what you've told us about Goering. Is it not a fact that you told Major Tilly, Hitler I called an amoral type, but Goering I can only regard as immoral and criminal. By nature, endowed with a certain bonhomie, which he managed to exploit for his popularity, he was the most egocentric being imaginable. The assumption of political power was for him only a means for personal enrichment and personal good living. The success of others filled him with envy. His greed knew no bounds. His predilection for jewels, gold, and finery was unimaginable. He knew no comradeship. Only so long as someone was useful to him was he friends with him, but only on the surface. Goering's knowledge in all fields equaled zero, especially in the economic field. Of all the economic matters which Hitler entrusted to him in the autumn of 1936, he had not the faintest notion. Though he created an immense official apparatus and misused his powers as lord of all economy most outrageously. In his personal appearance, he was so theatrical that you could only compare him with Nero. A lady who had tea with his second wife reported that he appeared at this tea in a sort of Roman toga and sandals studded with jewels. His fingers bedecked with innumerable jeweled rings and generally covered with ornaments. His face painted and his lips rouged. Did you give us that statement give that statement to Major Tilly?
Jawohl.
Yes. And you say you had no personal differences with Goering.
Mr. Justice, ich bitte doch hier wiederum nicht die Zeiten durcheinander zu werfen. Ich habe doch diese Dinge alle erst später erfahren und kennengelernt. Und nicht zu der Zeit, von der Sie sprechen, aus dem Jahre 36.
Well, now in do you dispute the testimony of Gustavus that in 1935 he told you about Goering's complicity in the whole Gestapo setup?
Ich habe hier ja bezeugt, dass ich von den Gestapo-Lagern, die Goering eingerichtet wusste. Ich habe ja gesagt, dass ich mich dagegen gewandt habe. Bestreite das ja gar nicht.
But your friendship with him continued notwithstanding that knowledge.
Ich habe nie eine Freundschaft mit Goering gehabt.
Well,
ich kann doch nicht ablehnen, mit ihm zusammenzuarbeiten, insbesondere solange ich nicht weiß, was für ein Mensch er ist.
All right. Let's take up foreign relations, about which you've made a good deal of complaint here. I think you've testified that in 1937, when you were doing all of this rearming, you did not envisage any kind of a war. Is that right?
Nein, das ist nicht richtig, was Sie da sagen, Mr. Justice. Ich habe im Jahre 37 nicht alles getan, um zu rüsten, sondern ich habe von 35, Ende 35 an, Herbst 35 an, alles getan, um die Rüstung zu bremsen.
All right. I refer to your interrogation of the 16th of October, 1945, and ask you whether you gave these answers to these questions. Question. Let me ask you then, in 1937, what kind of war did you envisage? Answer, never. We might have been attacked, invaded by somebody, but even that I had not expected. Question. You had not expected. Did you expect a possibility of a mobilization and concentration of economic forces in the event of war? Answer. In the event of an attack against Germany, certainly. Question. Now, putting your mind back to 1937, are you able to say what sort of an attack you were concerned with? Answer, I don't know, sir. Question, did you have thoughts on that at the time? Answer, no, never. Question, did you then consider that the contingency of war in 1937 was so remote as to be negligible? Answer, yes. Question, you did? Answer, yes. I have never thought of a conflict with Russia. Did you give those answers?
Ich habe genau das Gleiche, was in dieser Interrogation mitgeteilt wird, hier vor Gericht ausgesagt.
Well, now, you've testified that you tried to divert Hitler's plan, which was to move and expand to the east. You tried to divert his attention to colonies instead.
Wohl.
What colonies? You've never specified.
Unsere Kolonien.
Yeah, and where are they located?
Ich nehme an, dass Sie das genauso wissen wie ich.
Now, you're the witness, Dr. Schacht.
Ja, ich meine...
I want to know what you were telling Hitler, not what I know.
Oh, was ich Hitler gesagt habe. Ich habe Hitler gesagt, wir wollen versuchen, einen Teil der uns gehörenden Kolonien, deren Verwaltung man uns fortgenommen hat, wiederzubekommen, damit wir dort arbeiten können.
What colonies?
Ich habe speziell an afrikanische Kolonien gedacht.
Yes. And those African colonies you would regard as essential to your plan for the future of Germany.
Nicht diese, sondern überhaupt irgendeine koloniale Betätigung. Und ich habe natürlich zunächst meine Kolonialwünsche nur auf unser eigenes Eigentum richten können.
And your property was, as you call it, was African colonies.
Nicht ich nenne es so, sondern der Vertrag von Versailles nennt es so. Unser Property.
All right, have it any way you want it. I want the colonies you were talking about.
Ja.
You considered that the possession and exploitation of colonies was necessary to the sort of Germany that you had in mind creating.
Wenn Sie das Wort Exploitation vielleicht besser durch Development ersetzen wollen, so glaube ich, ist jedes Missverständnis ausgeschlossen und insofern stimme ich mit Ihnen ganz überein.
Well, by development you mean trading, and I suppose you expected to make a profit out of trade.
Nein, nicht nur Trade, sondern Developing the Natural Resources. Das heißt, die natürlichen, vorhandenen Wirtschaftsmöglichkeiten der Kolonien zu entwickeln.
Right. And it was your proposal that Germany should become reliant upon those colonies instead of relying on expansion to the east.
Ich habe jede Ausdehnung innerhalb des europäischen Kontinents für einen kompletten Wahnsinn gehalten.
Yeah. But you agreed with Hitler that expansion, either colonial or to the east, was a necessary condition of the kind of Germany you wanted to create.
No, habe ich niemals getan. Ich habe ihm gesagt, es ist ein Wahnsinn, nach dem Osten irgendetwas zu unternehmen. Es kommt nur eine koloniale Entwicklung in Frage.
Yeah. And you proposed, as a matter of policy, that Germany's development should depend upon colonies, as to which there was no overland trade route with Germany, and which you would require naval power to protect.
Ich denke gar nicht dran. Wie kommen Sie auf diese Idee?
Well, you don't get to Africa overland, do you? You have to go by water at some point, don't you?
Ich könnte durch die Luft gehen.
What was your trade route? Well, you were thinking only of air development.
Nein, nein, nein. Ich denke auf Schiffe.
Yes.
Ja.
Yes. And Germany was not then a naval power.
Ich glaube, wir hatten eine Handelsflotte, die sehr beträchtlich war.
What about, did your colonial plan involve rearmament by way of making Germany a naval power to protect the trade routes to the colonies that you were proposing?
Nicht im leisesten.
Then your plan was to leave the trade route unprotected.
Oh nein. Ich habe geglaubt, dass das internationale Recht einen ausreichenden Schutz bieten würde.
Well, that's... and that's what you disagreed with Hitler about?
Darüber haben wir nie gesprochen.
Well, in any event, he rejected your plan for colonial development.
Oh nein.
Well, now let's see.
Ich habe ja hier ausgeführt, dass mir Auftrag gab, im Sommer 36 auf mein Drängen hin, diese kolonialen Fragen aufzunehmen.
Did you not give these answers in your interrogation, Dr. Schacht? Question. In other words, at the time of your talks with Hitler in 1931 and 2 concerning colonial policy, you did not find him, shall we say, enthusiastic about the possibility. Answer, not enthusiastic and not very much interested. Question. But he expressed to you what his views were alternatively to the possibility of obtaining colonies. Answer, no. We didn't go into other alternatives. You give those answers?
Sicherlich.
Now, after the Fritsch affair, at least, you knew that Hitler was not intent upon preserving the peace of Europe by all possible means.
Ich bekam Zweifel.
And after the Austrian Anschluss, you knew that the Wehrmacht was an important factor in his Eastern policy. Did you not?
Ja, das können Sie so ausdrücken. Ich weiß nicht, was Sie damit meinen.
Well, don't answer anything if you don't know what I mean, because we'll make it clear as we go along. You disapproved of the 16. You disapproved. Well, first, except for the suggestion of colonies, you proposed no other alternative to his plan of expansion to the east.
Nein.
Never at any cabinet meeting or elsewhere did you propose any other alternative.
Nein.
Now, as to the move into Austria, I think you gave these answers. Actually, Hitler did not use the precise method that you say you favored. Answer, not at all. Question, did you favor the method that he did employ? Answer, not at all, sir. Question, what was there in his method that you didn't like? Answer, oh, it was simply overrunning, just taking the Austrians over the head, or what do you call it? It was force, and I have never been in favor of such force. Did you give those answers?
Jawohl.
Now, you have made considerable complaint here that foreigners didn't come to your support at various times in your efforts to block Hitler. Have you not?
Sicher.
Yeah. You knew at the time of the Austrian Anschluss the attitude of the United States toward the Nazi regime, didn't you, as expressed by President Roosevelt?
Jawohl.
Yeah. And you knew of his speech suggesting that the Nazi menace ought to be quarantined to prevent its spread.
Ich erinnere mich nicht, aber ich habe ihn damals sicher gelesen. Wenn er in Deutschland veröffentlicht wurde, also was ich annehme.
Well, Goebbels let loose a campaign of attack on the president as a result of it, didn't he?
Ich nehme an, dass ich das gelesen habe.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, you joined in the attack on foreigners who were criticizing the methods, didn't you?
Wann und wo? Welche Attacke?
All right. After the Austrian Anschluss, when force was used with your disapproval, you immediately went in and took over the Austrian National Bank, didn't you?
Das war ja meine Pflicht.
Yes. Well, you did it. We'll
Selbstverständlich.
get to the duty later.
Selbstverständlich.
And you liquidated it for the account of the Reich.
Nie liquidiert, fusioniert,
All right.
amalgamiert.
Amalgamated it. And you took over the personnel.
Alles.
Yes. And the decree doing so was signed by you.
Sicherlich.
Yes. And you called the employees together on the 21st day of March 1938
Jawohl.
and made a speech to them.
Jawohl.
And did you use this language, among others?
Sicherlich.
Well, you haven't heard it yet.
Doch, wir haben es schon gehört bei der Anklage.
Well, I'd like to quote some of it to you and remind you of it. I think it is quite useful, quoting, if we recall these things to our mind in order to expose all the sanctimonious hypocrisy exuding from the foreign press. Thank God, these things could, after all, not hinder the great German people on their way. For Adolf Hitler has created a communion of German will and German thought. He bolstered it up with the newly strengthened Wehrmacht, and he then finally gave the external form to the inner union between Germany and Austria. I am known for sometimes expressing thoughts which give offense, and there I would not like to depart from this custom. Hilarity is the note made at that point in your speech. I know that there are even here in this country a few people, I believe they are not too numerous, who find fault with the events of the last few days. But nobody, I believe, doubts the goal, and it should be said to all grumblers that you can't satisfy everybody. One person says he would have done it maybe in one way. But the remarkable thing is that they did not do it. And in parenthesis there then appears the word hilarity. Continuing with your speech, that it was only done by our Adolf Hitler. Long continued applause. And if there is still something left to be improved, then those grumblers should try to bring about these improvements from the German Reich and within the German community, but not to disturb it from without. Did you use that language?
Yeah.
In other words, you publicly joined those and publicly ridiculed those who were complaining of the methods. Didn't you?
Wenn Sie es so auffassen.
Then you also, in addressing the personnel of the Austrian National Bank, which you were taking over, said this: I consider it completely impossible that even a single person will find his future with us who is not wholeheartedly for Adolf Hitler. Parenthesis. Strong continued applause. Shouts of Sieg Heil. Continuing with the speech. Whoever does not do so had better withdraw from our circle of his own accord. Stormy applause. Is that what happened?
Ja, die waren alle damit einverstanden, merkwürdigerweise.
Now, had the Reichsbank before 1933 and 4 been a political institution?
Nein,
Had politics been in the Reichsbank?
niemals.
Well, on this day, speaking to its employees, you said this, did you not? The Reichsbank will always be nothing but National Socialist, or I shall cease to be its manager. Heavy, protracted applause. Did that happen?
Jawohl.
Now, sir, you have said that you never took the oath to Hitler.
Ja,
I ask you if this is what you, as head of the Reichsbank, required of your employees that you were taking over in Austria. I quote, now I shall ask you to rise. Parenthesis. The audience rises. Quoting again. Today we pledge allegiance to the great Reichsbank family, to the great German community, we pledge allegiance to our newly arisen, powerful Greater German Reich. And we sum up all these sentiments in the allegiance to the man who has brought about all this transformation. I ask you to raise your hands and to repeat after me. I swear that I will be faithful and obedient to the Führer of the German Reich and the German people, Adolf Hitler, and will perform my duties conscientiously and selflessly. Parenthesis. The audience takes the pledge with uplifted hands. Paragraph. You have taken this pledge, a scoundrel he who breaks it. To our Führer, a triple Sieg Heil. Is that a correct representation of what took place?
Der Eid ist der vorgeschriebene Beamteneid und es entspricht völlig dem, was ich gestern an dieser Stelle gesagt habe, dass der Eid gilt dem Oberhaupt des Staates, wie es ja auch vorher genau von mir ausgeführt ist. Wir stehen zum deutschen Volk, oder ich weiß nicht, wie der deutsche Ausdruck da lautet, ich höre Ihre englische Aussprache hier. Genau dasselbe sagt dieser Eid.
I referred to a EC 297, United States Exhibit 632 in the course of this. That is the exhibit I've been... So you say that was to an impersonal head of state and not to Adolf Hitler?
Ja, man kann ja nicht einer Idee einen sichtbaren Eidausdruck geben. Und infolgedessen muss man ihn ja auf eine Person zuschneiden. Aber ich habe ja gestern bereits gesagt, dass ich ja auch keinen Eid auf Herrn Ebert und auf Herrn Hindenburg oder auf den Kaiser geleistet habe, sondern auf das Staatsoberhaupt als Repräsentant des Volkes.
Well, you told your employees that all of the sentiments of this oath were summed up in the allegiance to the man, didn't you?
Nein, steht
Isn't that
nicht.
what you said? Well,
Wenn Sie nachlesen wollen, es steht nicht da zu dem Mann, sondern zu dem Führer. Das ist das Staatsoberhaupt.
Well, no matter what you took the oath to, you were...
Entschuldigen Sie mal, das ist ein sehr großer Unterschied.
Well, we'll get to that. Whatever you took the oath to, you were breaking it at the very time, were you not?
Nein, ich habe niemals diesem Manne als Vertreter des deutschen Volkes den Eid gebrochen, sondern ich habe meinen Eid gebrochen, als ich fand, dass dieser Mann ein Verbrecher war.
There came a time when you plotted to cause his death.
Ja,
Do you want to explain to the tribunal how you could cause the death of Adolf Hitler without also causing the death of the head of the German state?
da ist kein Unterschied, weil der Mann leider das Haupt des deutschen Volkes war.
Let me see page 71. There's another 70. 71. I think on this document, is there 69? Oh, yeah. You say you never broke the oath.
Ich weiß nicht, was Sie damit sagen wollen. Ich habe selbstverständlich den Eid, dem ich Hitler geschworen habe, Hitler nicht gehalten, weil Hitler leider Gottes selber ein Verbrecher, ein Meineidiger war und ein anderes Oberhaupt des Volkes nicht vorhanden war. Ich weiß nicht, was Sie mit Eidbruch sagen wollen, aber ich habe ihm meinen Eid nicht gehalten und bin stolz drauf.
So you were administering to your employees an oath which you at that moment were breaking and intended to break. Right?
Sie werfen wieder die Zeiten durcheinander, Mr. Justice. Es war dies in einer Zeit im März 38, als ich, wie Sie vorhin von mir gehört haben, noch zweifelhaft war und mir infolgedessen noch nicht klar war, was für ein Mann Hitler war. Erst als ich im Laufe des Jahres 38 merkte, dass Hitler eventuell in einen Krieg hineingehen würde, habe ich den Eid gebrochen.
Only when did you find he was walking into a war?
Als ich im Laufe des Jahres 38 nach und nach aus den Ereignissen entnahm, dass Hitler eventuell in einen Krieg hineinsteuern würde, und zwar absichtlich, erst da habe ich meinen Eid gebrochen.
Well, you stated yesterday that you started to sabotage the government in 1936 and 7, didn't you?
Jawohl.
Yeah.
Weil ich keine übermäßige
And
Rüstung...
you were
Verzeihen, weil ich keine übermäßige Rüstung wollte.
And we find you administering an oath to the employees to be faithful and obedient. Now I ask you if you didn't make this statement in interrogation. Question. But you make this statement at the end of the oath, after everybody had raised his hand and made his oath. Did you say the following? You have expressed this oath, a bad fellow who breaks it. Answer. Yes, I agree to that, and I must say that I myself broke it. Question. Do you also say that at the time that you urged this upon the audience, that you already were breaking it? Answer. I am sorry to say that internally I was very shaken in my loyalty already at that time, but I hoped that things would turn out well at the end.
Ich freue mich, dass Sie das zitiert haben, denn es bestätigt ja genau das, was ich eben gesagt habe, dass ich mich im Zweifel befand und dass ich noch Hoffnung hatte, dass die Dinge gut auslaufen würden. Das heißt, dass Hitler sich nach der guten Seite entwickeln würde. Es bestätigt also genau das, was ich eben gesagt habe.
Well, I'm sure we want to be helpful to each other, Dr. Schacht.
Ich bin ganz überzeugt, dass wir beide die Wahrheit finden wollen, Mr. Justice.
Now, you remained in the Reichsbank after this Anschluss, of course.
Ja.
And you remained there until January of 39 to
Ja.
fix the date. Now, after this Anschluss, the Mayfall bills which had been issued began to become due, didn't they, in 1938 and 9?
Nein, die MEFO-Wechsel, da fielen die ersten, also die Fälligkeit der ersten MEFO-Wechsel müssen frühestens gefallen sein in das Frühjahr 39. Die waren alle auf 5 Jahre ausgestellt und ich nehme an, dass die ersten MEFO-Wechsel im Frühjahr 34 begeben worden sind, sodass die ersten MEFO-Wechsel im Frühjahr 39 fällig wurden.
Well, this is the answer and the question which misled me if I'm wrong. Question. Well, did you in the Reichsbank utilize funds which were available? Let me put it this way. As these Mayfall bills became due, what did you do about them? Answer. I asked the Minister of Finance whether he could repay them, because after 5 years he had to repay them, some in 1938 or 39, I think. The first Mayflower bills would have come to repayment. And of course he said, I can't. You had that conversation with the finance minister while you were still president of the Reichsbank.
Mr. Justice, Sie können sich denken, dass wir aus der ganzen Finanzgebarung etwas besorgt wurden, ob wir unsere Wechsel zurückgezahlt bekämen oder nicht. Und ich habe hier bereits dem Gericht erzählt, dass in der zweiten Hälfte des Jahres 38 der Finanzminister in Schwierigkeiten kam. Und er kam ja auch zu mir, um neues Geld zu leihen. Daraufhin habe ich ihm gesagt, hören Sie mal, in welcher Situation sind Sie denn? Sie müssen uns doch demnächst die ersten MEFO-Wechsel wieder zurückzahlen. Sind Sie nicht darauf vorbereitet? Und nun stellte sich heraus, das ist also im Herbst 38 gewesen, dass der Herr Reichsfinanzminister keinerlei Vorbereitungen getroffen hatte, um sein Versprechen einzulösen, nämlich die MEFO-Wechsel zurückzuzahlen. Und das machte natürlich im Herbst 38 die ganze Beziehung zum Reichsfinanzminister zwischen Reichsbank und Reichsfinanzminister außerordentlich schwierig.
Now, taxes didn't yield any sufficient revenue to discharge those bills, did it?
Jawohl, ich habe ja gestern bereits gesagt, dass das Risiko, was in den MEFO-Wechseln lag und was ich von vornherein zugegeben habe, kein Risiko war, wenn man eine vernünftige Finanzpolitik trieb. Das heißt, wenn man vom Jahre 38 an nicht weiter gerüstet hätte und weiter unsinnige Ausgaben gemacht hätte, sondern wenn man das aus Steuern und Anleihen aufkommende Geld zur Rückzahlung der MEFO-Wechsel benutzt hätte.
Now, all I'm asking you at the present moment, Dr. Schacht, is that these bills could not be paid out of the revenue from taxes
Doch,
as they matured.
doch.
They could have?
Na selbstverständlich, das ist ja das Merkwürdige. Aber sie sind nicht zurückbezahlt worden, sondern das Geld ist dazu verwandt worden, um weiterzurüsten. Darf ich noch eins zu Ihrer eigenen Erläuterung, Mr. Justice, und Unterrichtung sagen?
Well, I'm really not concerned about the financing. I'm merely concerned with what kind of a mess you were in
Ja.
at the time you resigned.
Ja.
Mayflower bills were due and couldn't be paid, or were
Nein, das
they were shortly to mature.
Ja, aber sie konnten bezahlt werden. Das ist ein Irrtum, wenn Sie meinen, sie konnten nicht bezahlt werden.
Well, they couldn't be paid out of the current year's taxes, could they?
Doch, jawohl. Sie sind nicht daran interessiert und wollen das nicht von mir hören, aber ich bin gerne bereit, es aufzuklären.
Your foreign, well, you've explained it pretty well to us.
Sie haben mir eben gesagt, Sie wären nicht interessiert.
Your subscription to the Fourth Reich loan of 1938 had produced unsatisfactory results, hadn't it?
No, sehr wenig erfreulich. Der Kapitalmarkt war nicht gut.
And you had reported on the loan that there had been a shortage in the public subscription.
Ja,
And the result had been unsatisfactory.
jawohl.
Now, did you not make this answer to the interrogator? Question. But I am asking you whether, during that period, from the 1st of April 38 to January 39, you did not continue to finance armaments? Answer. Sir, either these Mayfo bills had to be refunded by the Reich, which they could not, because the Reich had no money to do it, and I couldn't procure any money for refunding, because that should have to come from taxes or loans. So I had to continue to carry these Mayfo bills, and that, of course, I continued. Did you give that answer?
Ja, das ist völlig in Ordnung, weil der Finanzminister eben
Well, now you make any
Na, bitte
explanation you want about it.
lassen Sie mich bitte aussprechen, nicht wahr? Weil der Finanzminister seine Mittel für die Rückzahlung der MEFO-Wechsel nicht zur Verfügung stellte, sondern sie für die Aufrüstung zur Verfügung stellte. Hätte er die Mittel benutzt, um die MEFO-Wechsel zu bezahlen, so wäre alles in Ordnung gewesen.
Yes, and you carried the Mayfo bills, which let him use current revenues to continue the plan of rearmament after 1938, didn't you?
Ja, Mr. Justice, die Dinge liegen so. Ein großer Teil der MEFO-Wechsel war im Geldmarkt und Kapitalmarkt untergebracht. Wenn nun der Geld- und Kapitalmarkt von der Reichsseite her zu stark in Anspruch genommen wurde, so brachten die Leute die MEFO-Wechsel zur Reichsbank und die Reichsbank hatte ja versprochen, sie aufzunehmen. Das war eben die große Konterkarierung meiner Politik durch die Politik des Reichsfinanzministers, die davon herkam, dass der Reichsfinanzminister die Rüstung finanzierte, anstatt, wie er versprochen hatte, die MEFO-Wechsel einzulösen.
Now, it was under those circumstances that you took a position which would result in your retirement from the Reichsbank.
Ja.
Yes. Well, now we come to Czechoslovakia. Did you favor the policy of acquiring the Sudetenland by threat of resort to arms?
Gar nicht.
I think you've characterized the manner in which the Sudetenland was acquired as wrong and reprehensible.
Ich wüsste nicht, wann ich das getan hätte. Ich habe gesagt, die alliierte Politik schenkte Hitler das Sudetenland, während ich immer nur erwartet hatte, dass man den Sudetendeutschen eine Autonomie geben würde.
Then you approved of Hitler's policy in handling the Sudetenland situation. Is that what you want to be understood as?
Ich habe nie gewusst, was Hitler über die Autonomie hinaus oder dass Hitler über die Autonomie hinaus irgendetwas verlangt hätte.
Your only criticism of the Czechoslovakian situation relates to the Allies, as I understand you.
Ach, das geht auch auf die Tschechen und auf die Deutschen vielleicht selber. Ich meine, ich will um Gottes Willen hier keinen Richter spielen.
Well, now, on the 16th of October, 1945, United States Exhibit 636, I ask if you didn't make these replies to questions. Question. Now I am coming back to the march against Czechoslovakia, which resulted in the appeasement policy in Munich and the cession of the Sudetenland to the Reich. Answer, yes. Question. Did you at that time favor the policy of acquiring the Sudetenland? Answer, no. Did you favor at that time the policy of threatening or menacing the Czechs by force of arms so as to acquire the Sudetenland? Answer, no. Certainly not. Question. Then I ask you, did it strike you at that time, did it come into your consciousness that the means that Hitler was using for threatening the Czechs was the Wehrmacht and the armament industry? Answer, he could not have done it without the Wehrmacht. Did you give those answers?
Jawohl.
Continuing, did you consider the manner in which he handled the Sudeten question wrong or reprehensible? Answer, yes. You did? Yes, sir. Question, and did you have a feeling at that time, looking back on the events that had proceeded and in your own participation in them, that this army, which he was using as a threat against Czechoslovakia, was at least in part an army of your own creation? Did that ever strike you? Answer, I cannot deny that, sir.
Sicherlich nicht.
But here again, you turned in to help Hitler once he'd been successful with it, didn't you?
Wie können Sie so etwas sagen? Ich habe doch nicht gewusst, dass Herr Hitler die Armee brauchen wird, um irgendwelche Bedrohungen von Fremden auszuführen.
Oh, after he had done it, you turned in and took over the Czech bank, didn't you?
Selbstverständlich.
Yes. You followed to clean up economically, just as fast as Hitler got the territory, didn't you?
Aber verzeihen Sie, er hatte es ja gar nicht mit Gewalt genommen. Die Alliierten haben ihm ja das Land geschenkt. Es war ja alles friedlich erledigt.
Yeah. Well, we have your testimony on what the part the Wehrmacht played in it and what part you played in the Wehrmacht.
Jawohl.
Pass that.
Nie geleugnet.
No. What I mean is this. Question, referring to your interrogation of the 17th of October. Now, after the Sudetenland was taken over by the Munich Agreement, did you, as president of the Reichsbank, do anything about the Sudeten territory? Answer, I think we took over the affiliation of the Czech Bank of Issue. Question, and you also arranged for the currency conversion, did you not? Answer, yes. That's what you did after this wrong and reprehensible act had been committed by Hitler, didn't you?
Es ist kein wrong und reprehensible act von Hitler committed worden, sondern Hitler hat im Vertragswege das Gebiet der Sudetendeutschen erhalten und selbstverständlich musste die Währung und das Institut, welches die Währung leitete, in diesem Teile mit Deutschland amalgamiert werden. Da ist von Unrecht gar keine Rede. Ich kann mir nicht denken, dass die Alliierten ihre Unterschrift unter ein Unrecht gesetzt haben.
So you think that everything up to Munich was all right?
Nein,
Well, no.
da bin ich durchaus anderer Ansicht. Es ist sehr vieles Unrecht gewesen.
Were you in this court when Goering testified to his threat to bomb Prague, the beautiful city of Prague?
Dank Ihrer Einladung habe ich mich hier befunden.
Yes. I suppose you approved that use of the force which you had created in the Wehrmacht.
Missbilligt, unter allen Umständen.
You didn't think that was right dealing then?
Nein, das war eine scheußliche Sache.
Well, we found something we agree on, Doctor. You knew of the invasion of Poland.
Jawohl.
You regarded it as an unqualified act of aggression on Hitler's part, didn't you?
Absolut.
Yes. The same was true of the invasion of Luxembourg, wasn't it?
Absolut.
And of Holland.
Absolut.
and of Denmark,
Absolut.
and of Norway,
Absolut.
and of Yugoslavia,
Absolut.
and of Russia.
Absolut. Und Norwegen und Belgien haben Sie vergessen, so weiter.
Yes. Well, I got to the end of my paper, Doctor.
You see.
The entire course was a course of aggression.
Absolut zu verurteilen.
And the success of that aggression at every step was due to the Wehrmacht, which you'd had so much to do with creating.
Leider.
Now I intend to take up another subject, and perhaps it would be, it's almost recess time.
Hello, sound recording. Hello, sound recording. There's a 10-minute recess.
If it please the tribunal, report is made that defendant von Neurath is absent.
Dr. Schacht, in your direct testimony, you made reference to a film which was taken and exhibited in Germany for propaganda purposes of your demeanor on the occasion of Hitler's return after the fall of France.
Darf ich nur richtigstellen, ich habe nicht von dem Film gesprochen, sondern mein Anwalt. Und dass er für Propagandazwecke gebraucht wurde, ist hier auch nicht zum Ausdruck gekommen, sondern mein Anwalt hat gesagt, er sei in der Wochenschau gezeigt worden. Ist also wahrscheinlich eine Woche lang gelaufen.
I will ask to exhibit that film to the tribunal. It's a very brief film, and the movement in it is very rapid. There is very little of translation involved in it, but the speed of it is such that for myself I had to see it twice in order to really see what the place of the persons.
Do you want to put it on now?
I would like to put it on now. It'll take only a moment, and Dr. Schacht should be placed where he can see it, for I want to ask him some questions, and particularly I may ask you to identify the persons in it. I will ask, if I may, to have it shown twice, so that after all has been seen, you can see it more in detail.
Certainly.
Weil Hitler und Goering und wer sonst dazu mitgesprochen hat, 7 Wochen gebraucht haben, um sich über die Konsequenzen meines Briefes klar zu werden.
Until this, well, your letter plainly shows that you thought the ship was sinking, doesn't it? You thought the Loire was lost.
Das haben bereits meine mündlichen und schriftlichen Darstellungen aus viel früherer Zeit gezeigt. Ich habe davon hier ebenfalls berichtet. Ich habe von dem Brief an Ribbentrop und Funk berichtet. Ich habe eine ganze Reihe von Darstellungen hier gegeben, die beweisen, dass ich niemals an die Möglichkeit eines deutschen Sieges geglaubt habe. Und mein Verschwinden aus dem Amt hat mit all diesen Dingen gar nichts zu tun.
Now, meanwhile, while you were remaining as Minister of Portfolio, because you thought it might be dangerous to resign, you were encouraging the generals in the army to commit treason against the head of state, were you not?
Jawohl, und ich möchte jetzt wieder eine Bemerkung machen. Ich habe nicht wegen drohender Lebensgefahr nicht eher resignieren können. Ich habe mich vor dieser Lebensgefahr ja nicht gefürchtet, denn ich bin ja von 37 an in ständiger Lebensgefahr gewesen und war der Willkür der Partei und des Parteiobersten ausgeliefert. Ihre Frage, dass ich eine Masse Generäle versucht habe, zum Hochverrat zu veranlassen, bejahe ich.
And you also tried to get assassins to assassinate Hitler.
Ich habe in 38, als der erste Versuch von mir gemacht wurde, noch nicht an eine Ermordung Hitlers gedacht. Ich muss allerdings gestehen, dass ich später gesagt habe, wenn es nicht anders geht, müssen wir den Mann umbringen, wenn es möglich ist.
Did you say, we'll have to kill him, or did you say, somebody else will have to kill him, Dr. Schacht?
Wenn ich die Gelegenheit gehabt hätte, hätte ich ihn umgebracht. Ich bitte mich aber deswegen nicht, wegen Mordversuchs vor ein deutsches Gericht zu bringen, denn ich bin selbstverständlich in diesem Sinne schuldig.
Well, now, whatever your activities, they were never sufficiently open so that the foreign files in France, which you say were searched by the Gestapo, had an inkling of it, were they?
Ja, ich konnte diese Sache nicht vorher in der Zeitung annoncieren.
And the Gestapo, with all its searching of you, never was in a position to put you under arrest until after the 20th of July attack on Hitler's life.
Sie hätte mich längst unter Arrest bringen können, wenn sie etwas klüger gewesen wäre. Aber das scheint eine Sondereigenschaft jeder Polizei zu sein.
And it was not until 1943 that the Hitler regime dismissed you, until that time apparently in the belief that you were doing them more good than harm.
Was Sie für Gedanken dabei gehabt haben, weiß ich nicht. Da bitte ich mich nicht drüber zu fragen. Da müssen Sie jemanden aus dem Regime fragen. Und Sie haben ja noch Leute hier.
You have now contended that you know about the plot of the 20th of July on Hitler's life.
Ich wusste darum.
You know that Gusevius says you didn't know about it.
Ich habe bereits gesagt, gestern, dass ich nicht nur über die Bemühungen Gördelers unterrichtet war, sondern dass ich durch General Lindemann ganz genau informiert war. Und es ist das Zeugnis des Obersten Gronau hier ja verlesen worden. Ich habe ferner gesagt, dass ich meinen Freunden davon keine Nachricht gegeben hatte, weil ich niemanden, und das war eine gegenseitige Abrede, wir uns niemanden etwas mitteilten, was ihn bei einer eventuellen Folterung durch die Gestapo in Verlegenheit bringen konnte.
Do you recall that Gusevius said there were only 3 civilians that knew about that plot, which was carefully kept within military personnel?
Sie sehen, dass auch Gusevius nicht über jede Einzelheit unterrichtet war. Er kann natürlich nicht mehr aussagen, als was er wusste.
And so, Dr. Schacht, we are to weigh your testimony in the light of the fact that you preferred, over a long period of time, a course of sabotage of your government's policy and of treason against the head of state, rather than open resignation from his cabinet.
Sie kommen immer wieder mit der Resignation. Ich habe Ihnen gesagt und bewiesen, dass es keine Resignation gab. Infolgedessen ist Ihre Schlussfolgerung irrig.
All right, now let's see. You were interrogated on the 16th of October, 1945, U.S. Exhibit 636. And some questions were asked you about the generals of the Army. And I ask you if you weren't asked these questions and if you didn't give these answers. Question. I say, suppose you were chief of the General Staff and Hitler decided to attack Austria. Would you say you had the right to withdraw? Answer. I would have said, withdraw me, sir. Question. You would have said that? Answer. Yes. Question. So you take the position that any official could at any time withdraw if he thought that the moral organization was such that he felt he could not go on. Answer, quite. In other words, you feel that the members of the General Staff of the Wehrmacht who were responsible for carrying into execution Hitler's plan are equally guilty with him. Question. That is a very hard question you put to me, sir, and I answer yes. You gave those answers, didn't you? Did you give those answers?
Ja, und ich wünsche jetzt noch eine Bemerkung dazu zu machen, wenn das Gericht mir erlaubt. Wenn mir jemals Hitler einen unmoralischen Auftrag gegeben hätte, würde ich seine Ausführung abgelehnt haben. Das ist das, was ich auch von den Generälen gesagt habe, und ich stehe zu der Aussage, die Sie eben vorgelesen haben.
I'm through, please, Your Honors, except that I would like to note the exhibit numbers. The petition to Hindenburg referred to yesterday is 3901 PS and would become USA Exhibit 837. The von Blumberg interrogation of October 1945 is United States Exhibit 838.